Hello and welcome to the LA Venture Podcast. We're David Waxman and Minnie Ingersoll, partners and investors at TenOneTen.
Great. Hey, today it's just me, and I'm here with Noramay Cadena, a founding partner at MiLA Capital, and no David. So it's weird. We'll see how this goes. MiLA is a venture fund focusing on tech you can touch and also building community around founders who are working at the intersection of tech and manufacturing. Noramay, great to see you. I know you've got 3 degrees from MIT, so maybe we can talk about that. But let me start by just making sure I get the basics of MiLA up front, and then we can go into some about you.
Absolutely. So MiLA Capital was kicked off almost 5 years ago here in LA. We're in a quiet pocket of the West San Fernando Valley, which to some people really feels like it's Bakersfield, but it is a reverse commute from the west side and from downtown LA. So light industrial manufacturing area. And we've been investing in tech you can touch for the last 4.5 years. We have a portfolio of just about 20 companies, pre-seed and seed. And at this point, we're scaling our model. We're moving in a little bit of a different direction, but continuing to invest in pre-seed and seed. There are 5 sectors we're really targeting, and those sectors include ag tech and food tech, automation, mobility and aerospace, and health and wellness. And I may have missed one, clean tech and materials. And then we have a special affinity for female founders and founders of color, although it is not our sole focus.
Great. Got it. I think I got that all. Don't make me repeat it all. But so being, tell me again physically where you are?
We're in Chatsworth.
Chatsworth.
But invest globally. About a third of our portfolio is Southern California based.
Got it. And there's warehouses manufacturing in Chatsworth. Do you guys take advantage of local manufacturing?
You know, we do to a certain extent. The reason we're in Chatsworth is because we are partnered with a global Tier 2 contract manufacturer, and so we happen to be co-located just right next door to them. It enabled us to really establish a footprint and to build out a prototype lab and a maker space. And so we did that as a community resource under the name Toolbox LA. So Toolbox LA is now a 35,000 square foot co-working space, maker space, event space, biotech lab, art gallery in the middle of the San Fernando Valley where there was really a gaping hole for entrepreneurship and creatives.
Got it. And so are there a lot of companies that work permanently out of Toolbox?
There are now nearly 200 members who are part of this facility. And Shaun, there are 3 partners at MiLA Capital, so 2 of us actually grew up in the San Fernando Valley. So we saw these tech ecosystems emerge in not only West LA and downtown LA and Pasadena and Westlake Village and Santa Clarita, and we thought, wow, there's nothing in the San Fernando Valley, and yet we have this 4-year university, Cal State Northridge, with a growing entrepreneurship presence.
Well, that's great. Did not totally appreciate that was there. Okay, so those are some of the basics of MiLA, but give me a little bit more about just how it's evolved or the journey.
So when we kicked off in early 2015, we really wanted to be a full service resource to early stage companies. So we raised a proof of concept fund and we went out and advertised an accelerator program. And our idea was that we could attract pre-seed companies from around the globe and really make them successful through a high touch, dynamic sort of VC model with mentors, with access to resources on site, with partnerships. And so we ran a 4-month accelerator program model, and we ended up running 5 different cohorts of that over the years, and finally decided to sunset that model last year. So now we are operating as a traditional early stage venture fund, writing checks between $100K and $1 million.
What are some examples?
Yeah. So one of our recent investments is a company in the food tech space building a device that allows, in their first phase, for food service workers to test how well they're washing their hands after, let's say, going to the restroom. And so they use fluorescent spectroscopy, and a food worker can, put their hands under the device, flip them over, hit a button, and get a pass-fail. So this company had a prototype, and they wanted to evaluate their unboxing experience and the installation of the pilot. So they came to see us in our facility. Shaun and I, we put our pilot hats on, and we unboxed and gave our feedback throughout the whole process. From the instructions to the packaging of the device, the number of parts, the tools, whether or not they were included. Should this have a sticker here? Should it be matte? Should it be glossy? So that's one example of a sprint.
So wait a second. So let me just back up. So if I put my hands in this, is it like seeing the bacteria on my hands?
Yes.
Or the dirt? Or
Yes.
just the bacteria? Or like...
So it can detect things like E. coli.
A fast food chain might be a typical standard customer. It's not for me to have at my house or something.
Right.
For my kids. Oh my God, I would never want to see my kids. Like, how much does it cost to get something, like get the prototypes built? How do you coach people on how to just get their first thing built cheaply and into the world?
Yeah, so we often talk about the fact that we invest in hardware, but we're not a hardware fund, right? And this is it's a tricky topic. So hardware we define as anything that is tangible. It's a tangible product, and it's hard to really say what hardware is because it can fall under so many other verticals. It can be aerospace, it can be health tech, it can be clean tech, it can be food tech, and so these are all well recognized, respected, and appealing verticals, but for some reason hardware is not, because there's this idea that it's going to be very capital intensive. And so some of our companies have been able to get product out in market but on very little raised. One of our B Corp investments was able to bring in $3 million in revenue on only $1 million raised, which is pretty phenomenal even for an early stage software company, and they're selling internationally in developing countries. So it is the world is changing.
It's not as capital intensive as I think.
No.
And so what's a cheap way? How do I get, like, I want to build something. I always want to build things, but I don't know anything about building things. How do I get started? Where do I start?
You have to come to our makerspace.
Yeah.
So most of the companies who are coming in have a proof of concept. Now, a proof of concept is not the same as having a prototype, right? A proof of concept means that they have some sort of proof that the technology works. And then a prototype is, a visual reflection of this thing and what it would actually look like, in the real world, something that enables them to test with users. So they can have something like this built locally, and we help them find local manufacturers. We also work with Z Holly at Make It in LA, and reach out to her network of manufacturers.
So explain the difference to me between a contract manufacturer, what I should expect there, versus someone who's maybe helping me just do a small run, or someone who's a little bit more full service.
So a big contract manufacturer will take an existing design, most likely, and build many of them. So, often in the types of companies we invest in, we talk about going from one to many. When they're going from one, or when they're building 1 or 10 or 15 or 100, they need to find a supplier that is small and nimble, lower cost, and able to really be a partner with them. When they're ready to scale, that's when a contract manufacturer is the right partner.
Got it. And what criteria should I use to evaluate someone when I'm looking for, before I get to the contract manufacturer, when I'm going from prototype, say, to my first 50 things?
Yeah. Previous experience, willingness to be flexible and work with the founder and allow the founder access. We're really proponents of the founders being in the factory all the time, if possible, or as much as they can be, and really monitoring and understanding all the any of the failures or any of the hangups in the manufacturing process. So I would say access is really important.
Where are the big manufacturing hubs nowadays? But I think of Mexico, US, obviously, China. I imagine if I'm an LA-based founder, I'm not going to China.
Yeah, so actually, LA is a really big manufacturing hub, the biggest in the country. So LA is a pretty strong and popular place for founders who are building 1, 10, 15, 20, even up to 100 units.
And are there certain things that are much certain verticals or where there's a much stronger manufacturing presence? Like if I'm doing med tech, you just know to go to these people or that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So SoCal Alliance, puts together a really great report on Southern California and the different manufacturing clusters in the area. So they've labeled where med tech has a strong presence, and it's San Diego, but also Westlake Village, where say Amgen is. They talk about electronics, and we've kind of penciled ourselves in the San Fernando Valley there, but they talk about aerospace in the South Bay. So there are definitely clusters in LA that are more popular than others. Ag tech.
Great. Well, that's a natural segue. I need to have you just give a little bit of your background, which I know comes from aerospace.
Yeah. So I grew up here in the San Fernando Valley. I went to MIT, studied mechanical engineering, ended up at Boeing. So I worked there for 3 years, and then I moved to Seattle to join the Boeing commercial airplane division. I worked on the 777 and the 787 in a variety of roles, shop floor, supervision, engineering, assembly, and I had a great time. And then I went back to business school because I really wanted to be a leader in operations. And I thought that I would be the VP GM of the 777 program. And so that was my goal. So I went to business school and then went back to Boeing.
Is Boeing different, better, anything than like Northrop or, it seems, it's a little opaque to me, but it seems like they're the big ones in LA. And I don't actually really know the reputation or the difference between a Boeing and a...
So, my colleagues from Boeing at the time are all now at either Northrop or Raytheon. And so there is a lot of migration. Mm-hmm. So I find them equivalent.
Right.
I think the difference, the Boeing difference to me was a significantly larger commercial part of the business that I didn't really see within Northrop and Raytheon.
So Boeing has like airplanes, whereas Northrop might be a Department of Defense or something.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't really know that.
So the big commercial presence. So I went back to Boeing. I spent a few years there, started a nonprofit organization, and really found myself leading 2 full-time jobs. So I had this technical career during the day, and in the evenings and weekends, I had co-founded this organization with 4 colleagues from MIT who were all first-generation college grads. And so our goal was, how do we get more women into STEM, and particularly women of color? So this organization went out into different communities and used the power of local role models to really bring the message home. Here's my story. I did it. You can too. We did a lot of coaching with parents and tried to inspire them to be more open-minded about the types of careers their daughters might pick. And so it got to the point where I wanted to move faster. And I got on Angel List. And I was searching for my next gig when I saw a post from Shaun Arora. And Shaun was talking about manufacturing in LA and skipping the trip to China. And I thought, what the heck is he talking about? And so I met him for coffee, and we really connected on a few key ideas. And I think I quit my job just a couple of weeks after that, and that's where our firm was born. We shortly thereafter, once we realized that fundraising was way harder than we thought it would be, we brought on a third partner, Carmen Palafox.
Wait. So I'm gonna need to ask so many questions on this all, because going from Boeing to venture capital, mm-hmm. right? I didn't miss a step, right? Like
no.
That's a big jump. So we're gonna have to ask a lot about that. But also, if it's not too personal, I'm interested. Being first, you said you're first generation,
yes.
And now you have 3 degrees from MIT. Have you felt a lot of challenges yourself in your career because you maybe didn't, go to the same high school or wear the same hoodie or like?
I would say, I didn't know. I didn't know what I was missing out on, right? So I tell people that the size of my world in high school was just, it was small. I didn't know what I was capable of, and I didn't know what kind of opportunities I could pursue. And so I think the first half of my career was really about learning who I was, testing my own capacity. I can tell you that I was lucky in being exposed to engineering, because at the time that the opportunity was shared with me, I thought that if I got a job for $10 an hour, I was going to be okay. And so I think this inspires me to really look outside the box. We talk a lot about getting founders back on the VC rails. And getting founders on the VC rails means, doing a lot of work, down behind the scenes to get a founder ready to be seen and to really be seen by someone else. And so I love that term. There's a lot of prep work to be done in terms of the founder themselves, the business, to really look like what other people might appreciate.
Right. Which is tricky.
Yes.
You don't just want to end up with everyone in khaki pants and hoodies or whatever.
No.
It's a tricky one.
It is. It's it is one of the aspects of the industry that I think is changing rapidly and that I'm really excited about.
Me too.
And what I mean by that is, FRB puts out a list of micro VCs just about every year, and they put one out recently, and it lists over 1,000 micro VCs in the U.S. So funds under 100 million, and I think that trend is a good thing for founders. It means more options. It means more opportunities for affinities, whether it's with the partner or the investment thesis or the vertical.
Yeah, although I think, and it was either you or Carmen who shared with me the percent of Latina general partners in VC.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what it's? I know it's not good.
So Carmen and I recently helped kick off Latinx VC. So it's an organization that we were inspired to kick off based on Black VC and their mission to double the number of Black venture capitalists by 2030. And so the organization started with a directory, and we found that there are less than 20 Latina partners in venture in the country. So Carmen and I make up 10%.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It really...
Right. So so you and Carmen are 10% of the Latina general partners in the United States.
Correct.
Ah, I know 10%.
Yes, you do.
Wow.
Yes, you do. And so, yes, it's an opportunity. And I think I'm part of the Kaufman Fellows program, and I think that is another lesson out of the program where, it's pretty global. About half the class is from outside the U.S., and what I see is the same everywhere, right? It doesn't matter what background, it almost doesn't matter what background you have. Anyone can be successful. And it really is about the ethic and the power of your network. And I would say, it's easier than I thought it would be, and it's harder than I thought it would be. Easier in that, it takes process, it takes conviction, and it takes hard work. And it's harder in that fundraising is just, it's this political, nuanced game that I just underestimated.
But is it an old boys club still? I mean, fundraising, and I'm curious whether you meant fundraising for yourself or your portfolio company's fundraising,
for
or both.
Ourselves. For ourselves. I actually think it's harder for first-time fund managers than it is for first-time founders.
And I don't necessarily think I'm not trying to say it's only an old boys network. I actually just think it is. I heard Dick Costello say that it was really hard. He was the CEO of Twitter.
Yes.
And I also just think there's a lot more funds raising money.
Yeah.
The good news is I think there's a ton more entrepreneurs too. And so did Kaufman Fellows help you get ready?
Kaufman helped a little bit. It didn't quite help in all the tangible learning I thought it would be helpful with. It really helped by creating this awesome, tight-knit community I can tap into whenever, I want to, figure out what other firms are doing in a certain case. Have you ever done this? Do you have a sample that? So that is really where the Kaufman value came in. I would say for people thinking about jumping into VC, I think Portfolio has a great model for learning about VC. Are you familiar with the Portfolio platform? So it was started by Trish Costello, who coincidentally created the Kaufman Fellows program. So the idea is to bring primarily more women as LPs into the VC ecosystem. And so every year they're creating new funds that with a goal of having as many LPs as possible, which is kind of unheard of, right? You typically want the least number of LPs. So you can buy in for as little as $10,000. You still have to be an accredited investor, but it's a low ticket entry. And you become a member of the platform for a very specific fund. It can be Femtech. It can be their new Rising America fund, which is investing in founders of color or LGBTQ founders, and you become part of the platform. You can join in on the monthly calls and actually listen to the 5 leads, ask questions, and due diligence on a deal. So that kind of access is pretty amazing. You know what companies are pitching, you get to review the pitch deck, you hear them pitch, you can ask questions, and then you hear the team of investors deliberate.
So let me bring it back to MiLA, though, just because this is about MiLA. And so we talked some about manufacturing. What are some other interesting things that you're investing in right now?
Yeah, we're looking more at food tech and ag tech. We're trying to develop further connections to our own ag tech cluster here in California in the Central Valley. So deepening our relationships there. So one of the other areas where we're excited about is automation. And we talk about automation as another way to really talk about the fourth industrial revolution or manufacturing 4.0. You can be developing software that impacts automation. You can develop hardware. You can develop processes. You can develop dashboards. And so it's an area with wide scope and wide applicability.
Interesting. I think Meredith from MiLA Capital was saying one real challenge of automation right now is there isn't really a unified operating system.
I don't think you need to have a standard operating system. I mean, I see this as when you're thinking about productivity hacks, you can use Trello, you can use
Asana.
Yes, you can use Asana, you can use whatever, all these other platforms. So I don't think it has to. I think decentralization when it comes to automation is actually okay.
Got it. I want to hear more about productivity hacks, but let's just finish with MiLA and come back to the personal stuff, which I think is interesting. But just other things on MiLA, like, it's a smaller fund. You're writing smaller checks. So how do you think about, what sort of exit someone needs to have? Does this have to be someone going for the $1 billion exit?
Yes. I hear a lot about the venture model being broken, and it is exciting to me to see new firms, like revenue-based firms like Indie, like Founders First Capital by Kim in San Diego, Lighter Capital in Seattle, right? These are all firms that are providing non-dilutive funding that's based on a company's revenue. I think that is an exciting innovation in this space, but I digress.
No, I think that's interesting. So like in those models, it's non-dilutive. It's more like a loan.
Yes. They're qualifying startups based on existing revenue. So they're not it's not a risky loan.
Okay.
So they're saying once you reach a certain milestone of recurring revenue, we can loan you. It's almost like PO financing. Right? Because you have the recurring revenue coming in. So it's just another option for founders.
Great. Do you have other advice for founders that are coming to you?
So I mentioned earlier, we invest in hardware, but we're not a hardware fund. One of our biggest pieces of advice is like really be open-minded when you're targeting investors. 2 of our portfolio companies had a recent round completely filled by strategic investors who are not prominent online about investing. And so I think we're seeing more and more family offices investing directly, particularly on the impact side. We're seeing strategics making investments sometimes off the balance sheets. They don't necessarily have to have a corporate VC structure in place. Foundations are really coming in and investing in startups. And even people who say they don't invest in hardware will, right? Peloton, that's hardware.
Right. Yep.
And yet no one talks about them as hardware.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the biggest pieces of advice we have. Be open-minded.
Got it. And another thing you said was something about really latching on to your big fans. And why don't people latch on to their...
I don't know, because I have to remind myself to do that too. I meet so many founders who I think are just incredible, and whether or not we choose to make an investment, like I have a ton of ideas about how to help them and people I want to connect them to, and they just kind of disappear, and they never come back. And I just think, wow, if you came to me, I would probably spend 30 minutes with you like every couple of weeks brainstorming. And so I don't know what it is that
Really?
enables
do you do it yourself? Do you latch onto your fans?
So I try to. I have to remind myself to do it. And when I do, it's always incredible.
That's interesting. So one part of it is it's sort of carving out the time to be strategic.
Yes.
Another part for me is like not being intimidated. Like the people who are my big fans who are also people in influence, I feel hesitant to take their time.
Yeah. But think about people who come to you and ask for your advice, and how welcoming it can be, right? I mean, we all want to add value. We want to wake up in the morning and figure out how to make someone's day and how to add our own piece of value to someone's life. And so I think about that desire I have, and I believe that other people have it as well. And so when I reach out, it's in that mindset.
That's really nice. I usually wake up like, how am I going to survive? Like,
well,
let me get through. Like,
well, these are the days when, I'm not fighting myself to get out of bed.
We both have 2-year-olds, right?
Yes, we do.
I have some like sitting on my face when I wake up.
Yeah, well, this is usually at 5:30, 6 a.m.
Right. Yes. Oh, how can I make someone's day better? You're great.
Maybe I would end by saying there are things I'm really excited about in the industry. One is, this emerging trend of new fund managers in the space. I heard Carmen say something the other day, which really illustrates some of the activities we're involved in, some of our extracurriculars. She talked about how policy can really accelerate change. And so we're working in California to figure out how policy can really allocate capital toward female fund managers or fund managers of color who are grossly underrepresented in the market, right? So women-owned venture firms in the U.S. Have 4% of funds, of assets under management. Minorities together have 4%. Latinos own firms managing 1% of capital under management in the U.S. in venture. And so these are things we're passionate about, and we think a lot about how policy can help. And that's what I'm excited about.
Well, I'm glad to end on a positive note, and thank you so much for coming and
Thank you.
Sharing more about yourself and about MiLA.
Thank you.